Why crime is on rise in New York City. No matter where they are on a Bronx neighborhood street or in a Midtown Manhattan subway station, New Yorkers feel more exposed than they have in a long time. One Harlem resident remarked, "It's just a very sad situation. What's going on in New York City? I sincerely hope New York City improves. With crazy, unstable individuals in the subways and fearless youths carrying guns, violent crime has increased over the past 2 years. Previously occurring in back alleys, shootings now happen in the middle of the afternoon on busy streets, with bystanders caught in the crossfire as gang members fire at one another. Unarmed subway passengers are being randomly attacked while police officers are being shot. Some people are being robbed. It has escalated into an attack during the past 2 months. According to Citizens Crime Commission of New York President Richard Bourne, the levels of safety that we saw during the last 10 years are now being reversed. And it's a serious moment. No one should downplay the gravity of this. In 2021, there were 485 homicides in New York City, the most in 10 years. Additionally, there were more than 1,500 shootings, which is twice as many as just 2 years before and the greatest amount in 15 years. And serious offenses are increasing underground. Darcel Clark, the Bronx district attorney, said, "It's not only the law, it's people thinking they can get away with whatever they want. That's where we are right now, and it's incredibly terrifying. A complete disregard for mankind." Bourne said early intervention is key. "The age at which somebody first picks up a gun is getting younger and younger and younger," he said. "We now have 12 and 13-year-olds picking up guns and carrying. We really increasingly better focus on that." Bourne believes Mayor Eric Adams understands the crisis but needs to act quickly. "I think he has a very short window to put a cap on the rise in crime," Bourne said. "I think it will come down, but it's going to come down gradually." He is certain that federal agents can legally conduct targeted anti-gun patrols and that they have a duty to do so. He declared that in order to stop the flow of illicit firearms from what is known as the Iron Pipeline, which runs through Pennsylvania, the Carolinas, Texas, Alabama, Georgia, and Virginia, we must establish true interstate strike forces. The government may assist us in doing that tomorrow morning. Clark is convinced that coordinated investigations will help turn the tide. "We're putting together investigations that are phenomenal," she said. "And once we get them now, it's going to be able to stick because every agency is working together." How policing in New York City turned back the clock. Summertime has a reputation for being particularly violent, and the outbreak has mostly coincided with a rise in gun crime in New York City. Even while they were not representative of the neighborhood violence that accounts for the bulk of shootings, the February murders of 2 police officers and the April mass shooting on Brooklyn's subway trains stunned New Yorkers and put pressure on their new mayor, who ran on a platform of public safety. However, some people are worried that New York hasn't learned from its previous struggles with violent crime because of the actions he has done thus far. Even while the city is significantly safer than it was in the 1990s and the early 2000s, detractors claim the mayor is reverting to outdated, tough-on-crime tactics, while ignoring other tactics that helped the city experience its second record decline in crime in the 2010s. Adams garnered a lot of national media attention during his campaign as a counterweight to the defund the police movement, but he also pledged to take a balanced approach, combining more policing with improved social services and investments in neighborhood-based projects. Adams has made significant progress after 5 months in office. A new program has been launched to crack down on low-level offenses, including beating up subway fare, drinking in public with an open container, and dice games, which the police allege are precursors to violence. In order to stop the trafficking of guns, he has given collaboration with federal law enforcement top priority. He is also evicting homeless individuals from camps, claiming that doing so would make the city safer, and that doing so would make them safer in shelters. Bender's neighborhood safety teams, a reimagined version of a plainclothes anti-crime team that was disbanded in 2020 amid the George Floyd demonstrations, which is maybe the most contentious part of Adams' gun violence approach. A disproportionate amount of reports of abuse and police shootings were attributable to the unit. The next edition will still use unmarked automobiles but will wear a uniform with obvious police identity. The anti-gun units had made gun arrests, however, statistics collected by the city and state New York reveal that their most frequent arrests were for low-level offenses. Within their first 3 weeks of operation, the anti-gun units picked up more people for having a fake ID or a stolen credit card than for having a handgun. Public advocate Juman Williams compares the controversial approach used in the 1990s by former Mayor Rudy Giuliani and Police Commissioner Bill Bratton that contends low-level enforcement deters more severe violence. It does sound very similar to the broken windows model. New Yorkers of color were disproportionately the target of the approach. Everyone desires a high quality of life and wants to see quality of life issues resolved. Is it necessary for the police to carry out this activity? And do we really have to send the police first? After the 2014 death of Eric Garner, who was choked to death by police after being targeted for selling loose cigarettes, the NYPD moved away from smashed window-style enforcement in the midst of Black Lives Matter demonstrations. His killing marked a dramatic meeting point for broken windows enforcement and anti-crime squads, two essential elements of Adams' strategy. Advocates of broken windows and stop and frisk, two forceful policing tactics that Mayor Michael Bloomberg deployed but that were later found to be unconstitutional, attribute the drop in crime throughout the 1990s and 2000s to these tactics. They cautioned that using a lighter touch would result in more violence. Instead, gunshots decreased as arrests did. A second significant drop in crime occurred in New York City from 2015 and 2019. Noteworthy, this occurred at a time when violence elsewhere was either stable or rising. Then in 2020, the pandemic struck. By the summer, gun violence began to rise, and by the end of the year, the number of shootings had nearly doubled. The surge most heavily affected Black and brown communities. As for the crisis management system, the network of city-funded anti-violence organizations that worked so well under de Blasio, Adams promised during his campaign to expand it. Despite his rhetoric, however, there hasn't yet been an increase in funding. Just the opposite. City budget analyses show that funding for CMS will decline from $135 million to $99 million in the fiscal year, beginning 1 September 2022. Meanwhile, the system faces its own challenges, many of which existed long before Adams took office. Unlike the police, most anti-violence nonprofits cannot pay overtime, much less offer 24-hour service, and typically need to front their own cash before they can be reimbursed by the city. The police and prosecutions in jail and prison actually do make a difference, Glazer said. But we've also learned about the harms. And maybe even more importantly, we've learned about so many other ways that we have of creating safety. That's it for today's video. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel for future updates.